The one-iron golf system with founder David Lake.
This is GolfSmarter, sharing tips and insights from golfers and golf professionals to help lower your score. It's worked for your host, Fred Green.
So, as for our GolfSmarter group, one of the discussions we're having is about our favorite go-to club. People mostly said wedges, 7 or 8 iron. Mark Hainsworth wrote, "I'm with the 7 iron guys. Don't really know why, but I find a controlled 7 iron into the green is a very satisfying shot." Have you ever noticed that when you take a lesson and they use video to compare your swing to a pro, they only show the pro hitting one club? Now, if every iron in our bag is a different length, don't we need a different arm and body position for each club? So when you've got a favorite club in your bag, it's not the pitch angle of the head, it's the length of the shaft that is the best fit for you. Think about it. How you position yourself to the ball and the angle of attack is different for your 3-iron than it is for your pitching wedge, right? Why? Well, that's what David Lake has built his business around. David's the founder of the one-iron golf system, and in 1998, David wrote a book called One-Iron Golf, The Common Sense Approach to Better Golf, and is recognized as the authority on the single-length golf club design, and joins us today. Welcome to the GolfSmarter podcast, David.
Oh, well, thank you, Fred. Nice to speak with you.
It's great to speak with you. Actually, I found one-iron golf because one of our listeners turned me on to you, and I read what you had on the website, and I thought it was an absolutely fascinating approach to manufacturing of golf clubs. Explain to us, please, what one-iron golf is and what it's about.
Well, basically, it's a concept that all of the irons within a set are identical. You take the average golfer. 99 out of 100 golfers will have a favorite iron. One iron in their bag where their confidence level is 100%. They know they're going to nail it 99 out of 100 times every time they pull it out of the bag. And for the taller golfer, that might be, say, a 3 or 4 or 5 iron. For the shorter golfer, it might be a pitching wedge or a 9 iron. But the point is they all find a favorite iron. The idea of one-iron golf is to make every iron in your set that favorite iron. So what we do, we take the individual's wrist-to-floor measurement. We custom-built the whole set to fit them, okay? And all the irons in the set are the same length. They're not only the same length, they're the same lie angle, the same weight, the same club head weight. Realistically, the only difference between any iron within a set of one irons is just the loft angle on the club face.
And we're not talking, they're not the same loft angle. They're all different loft angles to standard loft angles, correct?
Well, exactly. We have a 4-degree loft angle progression between every iron. Now, that's unlike conventional irons, which might have a 2-degree loft angle change between a 3, 4, and 5 iron, and then maybe a 4 or 5-degree loft angle change between the middle irons, and then, maybe even higher between the wedges. In our set, you have an exact 4-degree loft angle change from the lob wedge all the way up through the 3 iron. So consequently, if you have all your irons the same length, the same weight, the same everything, and the only difference is this 4-degree loft angle change, then by making the same swing with each club, you will get an exact yardage gap distance between clubs, which is practically impossible to achieve with a conventional set of golf clubs.
Interesting. Now, when we talk about the lie angle, we advocate on the GolfSmarter podcast for everyone to get fitted for golf clubs. That you shouldn't just buy stuff off the shelf. You're not doing yourself any service. So when you do that and when you purchase a set of clubs, your lie angle should be the same on all your clubs anyway, shouldn't it?
Well, if we're talking about a conventional set of clubs, where, and let's go back a little bit, back in the old days, when you went out and bought a set of clubs, you went to a pro shop and they built them for you. We're all hickory shafts and so on and so forth. But they built them for you, and they built them all the same length with the same lie angle. It's basically the concept we have right now. And, of course, that was a very expensive proposition back then, and that's why golf got the name as a rich man's sport. Well, then, here in the early 20s, late teens, all of a sudden, steel shafts started making the scene, and they were finally approved by the USGA, and I think it was like 1926 or something like that. But the advantage here is that all of a sudden these sporting goods manufacturers could come out and mass produce golf clubs. See, they didn't have to fine-tune every hickory shaft and so on and so forth. So they could mass produce them, sell them at a much cheaper level, for the average guy to go out and play golf. So the bulk of America could start playing golf. Now, the only drawback here was the fact that all of a sudden these clubs couldn't be custom built to the individual. In other words, the length wouldn't fit everybody. It just doesn't fit into a mass production model to custom build the length of a club. So the idea came out, and this was nothing more than a manufacturing decision. It had nothing to do with golf at all. Manufacturing decision came out and said, you know what, let's do this. Let's just build a set of clubs, and each club, each succeeding club will be a half-inch longer than the one before it. So you have the conventional clubs you have today where they go in half-inch progressive incremental lengths. And their theory was that anybody, if you were 6'2", if you were 5'2", and you bought a set of these clubs, there would at least be one or two clubs in there that would come close to fitting you. And that's how that comes about with the conventional length clubs. You're right in what you promote on your show, that clubs should be fit to the individual. It doesn't make a difference if you're having conventional set of clubs or our set of clubs. They should be fitted to you. It's very important. The idea of just having conventional clubs in these half-inch length increments, and the idea being, well, a couple clubs, regardless of who you are, a couple clubs will fit you. I mean, it's ludicrous. So what we're doing is no different than what was done, before the advent of the steel shaft, for all intents and purposes.
And wow, so this is really a throwback idea. This is not an original idea.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And not only is it a throwback to how clubs were originally made, in the first place, but a lot of, and I don't want to name names or anything like this, but if you notice on the PGA Tour, every now and then the camera will pan across and you'll see the golfer's bag. And you notice a lot of these guys, the irons seem to stick out at about the same length. Okay? So this is something that was done in the past. This is something that I believe a lot of pros go towards that, in order to build consistency in their game by having, a single-length set. And also, Tommy Armour, back in the 80s or 90s, I'm not sure which, they came out with a set of irons called the EQL, stood for equal length. And basically, there again, it was a set of irons, all built to the same length, same lie angle, and so on and so forth. And they had those sold for, just a number of years. Then they finally stopped producing them, it was sometime in the late 90s, I believe.
So is, with the advent of graphite shafts, what does that do on the effect of equal length shaft on your clubs? Did that, because you went from the steel shaft where everyone now they're like, we have to make them a different length every time, which you're saying really wasn't even necessary to do in the first place.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And actually, you mentioned graphite shafts. For instance, in one-iron clubs, and bear in mind, I spent 10 years in the development of this system and the development and design work on our club heads and our golf clubs in total, including the shafting and so forth. I spent probably 10 years designing all this before we manufactured the first golf club. What we found is graphite shafts just do not perform to the level of steel. They never have. I don't think they ever will. And it's, just from shot-to-shot consistency, there's way too much torque in graphite shafts and so forth. The reason that graphite shafts have become popular, it's not so much that the consumer likes them so much, it's the fact that the golf manufacturers can charge a lot more money by selling you clubs with graphite shafts in them.
Ooh.
And it's a true statement. I mean, for instance, you take a look on the PGA Tour. How many players do you see using graphite shafts in their irons? And the answer is, maybe one, maybe two at the most. And probably the only reason they're using them is because they're being paid big dollars to use them. The point is, when you pull an iron out of your bag, you're aiming for a pin. And a steel shaft will always give you that much extra degree of control, over a graphite shaft. Now, certainly a graphite shaft is a little lighter, so on and so forth, and some people like that. But then again, it gets back to control. The lighter the golf club, the less control you're going to have. As a matter of fact, as golf clubs become lighter, the more you tend to make an arm swing because it's so light. So there's a lot of disadvantages with the graphite shafts.
But isn't there an advantage for older players, people who've lost a lot of flexibility on a graphite shaft and not giving as much resistance?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely
Really?
not. As a matter of fact, my opinion would be that a senior golfer or a lady golfer, something like this, is much better off with a steel shaft with a little slightly heavier club. And it goes back, to the reason of total weight. If your club is a little heavier, and I'm not saying that our clubs are heavy. Our clubs weigh about the same as a conventional 7-iron, which is not heavy in the first place. But the point is, they promote a body swing, okay? Whereas a lighter club it kind of promotes an arm swing. If you have problems with your joints and things like that, certainly you want to swing with your body. You don't want to swing with your arms. There are some advantages to a graphite shaft in, say, for instance, shock absorption qualities. As they say, and I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but it seems to me it's about 70% shock absorption, with a graphite shaft. In other words, if you hit, sometimes how you feel the shock all the way up to your elbows, sometimes you hit it so hard your ancestors feel the shock. well, what the graphite shaft will do will absorb 70% of that shock, so it makes it much easier on your joints and so on and so forth, especially for an elderly person. There's no question. However, with a steel shaft, the reason you get that shock in the first place, probably 90% of the reason for that shock, is because, typically speaking, shafts are not balanced to club heads. In other words, say, for instance, I'm a major golf club manufacturer and I produce such and such club heads. Well, as far as shafts, I don't design my own shafts for that club head. I go out to True Temper or somebody else, or whatever company, and I buy their stock shafts. And I use those. Well, that shaft does not match that club head. It just doesn't. Unless you specifically design a shaft for a club head, you're going to have an imbalance. And that imbalance will create an awful lot of this shock. In our clubs, for instance, the 10 years that I say I design, spend in design and so on and so forth, a lot of that time was in designing the shaft for our golf club. Our club heads obviously all weigh the same. They're identical, so we can use the same shaft. But in order to get a good match, I had to design a shaft specifically for that club head, which does a number of things. Number one, it allows for the balance between club head and shaft. So it doesn't produce that shock that the typical steel shaft a golf club will produce. Secondly, we take all of our shafts and we find the inherent flex plane of the shaft. Now, a lot of people have heard of that as SST Puring, for instance, is a company that does that. Another one is spine aligning, a bunch of different terms. Basically, what you're doing, you have a round shaft, and you look at it and say, oh, gee, that's a nice round. It's going to flex in every plane exactly the same. Well, that's not true. You have a weld seam up the side of the shaft. You have manufacturer's tolerances. We have a little thicker steel up here, thinner steel, so on and so forth. The shaft wants to bend in one plane. If you rotate it a little bit, try to bend it, it's going to resist a little bit. Then you rotate it some more, it's going to resist a little bit. What we do, on every single shaft, we determine the inherent flex plane of every single shaft. Then we orient that flex plane, properly in relation to the club face. So that basically what happens when you make your swing and the club's coming through impact, the club head is like it's on rails coming through impact. It comes through nice and straight. If you don't determine that inherent flex plane and align the shaft accordingly, then what happens is during the swing, the shaft is flexing and it's trying to rotate on the axis it wants to rotate on. So you end up with a wobbling club head through impact. That produces an awful lot of the shock that we're talking about. So I guess what I'm getting at is a combination of having a shaft that's designed for a club head, so you have a perfect balance, and at the same time have, determining the inherent flex plane of that shaft, installing it correctly into the club head, Those two things eliminate almost all of that potential shock. A lot of our customers are former graphite shaft players, and this was always a concern of theirs. We'd received emails, well, I've played graphite shafts all my life, will this make it? We tell them, well, try them. And they try them, and they all, write back and say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But anyway, if you do a steel shaft right in a golf club, it will outperform graphite shaft all day long.
You must be seen as a heretic in the industry.
Oh, I get hate. I have death threats, Brad, I'll tell you.
No, come on, no. Not death threats.
I probably have people with those little dolls sticking pins in me all day long. No, think about it. It's common sense. Golf, I don't care what you see on the Golf Channel. I don't care what you see in the 10,000 golf instructional books you've read. Golf is a very, very simple game. If there's a ball on the ground, you got a stick in your hand, and all you're doing is hitting the ball. Very simple. Common sense would dictate that what I am saying is correct. It's just common sense. How many people have at one point in time during their golfing life said to themselves, gee, why aren't all these clubs the same length? Why do I got to keep switching, my stance, my ball position, my swing, and all this every time I pick up? Why aren't they all the same length? It's common sense.
It really does kind of fall into a common sense thing, but then you think about the millions of dollars that are spent on research and development by all these club manufacturers. I'm kind of baffled. It seems like you're telling me that it's all hype. It's all greed. They're just trying to convince us, and we're buying into it, that we have to make these changes all the time.
Fred, did I say that?
No, I did.
Basically, what you hit the nail right on the head. Let's face facts. You take your average golf club manufacturer out there, a big name brand. What's true? You go out and you buy a set of clubs from them, spend $1,200, $1,500, whatever. 6 months later, they come out with their new and improved. Well, basically what they're telling you is what you bought was junk. You need to get rid of it and buy their new and improved. And it's interesting that every year they come out with their new and improved. You would think after 20 years they'd get the design right.
Well, the other thing that kind of baffles me about it, and I was doing a program where we were talking to R&D people on a regular basis, and it seems like the rules that they're confined to work within don't change, and yet they continue to come up with new product. And it's like, how did you come up with a new and improved, or is this really the first time you're looking at the way the wind flows over you've never done that before? And then what you did, you went from being an X to X2 to X3. It's like, do I really need to buy a new club this year, or is it really last year's club with a new name on it? And you're telling me that it's all because it's a big company and they have to keep selling new clubs.
Well, that's absolutely correct. It's just like
are we that as a consumer, are we that gullible?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we've solved the world's problems here.
Well, here's the thing, Fred. There again, golf's a very simple game. Now, you can make it as complex as you want to, and that's fine. If you want to go to the driving range and take a plumb bob and a compass and wind gauges and so on and so forth, by all means, go ahead and do that if you like to do that. But the fact of the matter is, golf is a simple game, and the equipment can be just as simple. Yes, these companies, they come out with a new and improved every year. You've got to ask yourself, how did they spend more of their money on R&D, or did they spend more of their money on marketing, advertising to sell you this stuff? And don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing the companies for doing that. They've been doing it for years, and that's fine, and that's how the industry goes. But my opinion is, let's put it this way. Since we came out with our 1-irons, we have never made one change. Not one. And for the next 20 years, we will never make a change. It's the same club. Why? Well, number one, I don't know of anything that I can do to that club to make it better. If I did, believe me, I'd do it. But I don't know anything, and certainly there's no giant technological change that occurs every year in the golf industry to make something better. It just doesn't happen.
Oh, okay, so I just want to, you're saying that golf is a simple game. Now, in concept, yes, golf is a simple game, but in performance, it's not a simple game, especially for many of us who don't start playing at the age of 3 or 5 or 6. That when you pick up the game as an adult, it's all into your head. It's just not a simple game to do, and I think that's why we keep coming back, because we want to make it simple for ourselves, and other people say that it is simple. Earlier, you talked about having a favorite club in your bag.
Yeah.
You know, and your go-to club, and you just have a lot of confidence in that club. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about the mental part of the game. I know that I used to have an allergy to my 5-iron. I just couldn't do anything right with it. Mm-hmm. And then now it's my 6-iron, and my 5-iron's fine. So clearly, to me, that's a mental thing. It's I don't think I've made many changes in my swing or my posture. Maybe it is my posture, but why don't this is really interesting. Why don't other manufacturers do this?
Well, they can't. And then let me elaborate on that.
Please.
Like I say, Tommy Armour, back in the 80s, early 90s, whenever it was, came out with their EQLs. They failed. They had them out for about 2 or 3 years, but they failed. And the reason they failed, it's twofold. Number one, they built them all to a 6-iron length. So I don't care who you were, you got a set of them, it was that length. You couldn't get them custom fitted to you, which is, that's completely wrong. I believe you and I would agree. Lie angle and club length, there's a relationship there that cannot be ignored, and they have to be fitted to the individual golfer. There's no question about that. The guy that's 6'2" and the guy that's 5'6" they cannot play the same length of club. Okay, so that was one big drawback for the EQLs. The other one was the fact that Tommy Armour was still producing, all their regular conventional lines of golf clubs. Now they came out with a set of irons that were all single length. Well, it creates a paradox. They can't sit here and say, well, these single-length clubs are the best thing in the world, without saying that their conventional clubs are junk. Mm. And they can't say their conventional clubs are the best things in the world without saying their single-length irons are junk. It was a paradox. And I believe that's one of the reasons you don't see any of the major companies coming out with that today. Just because the fact they would be creating a paradox within their own company.
That's a very interesting point. How long has 1-iron golf been around?
11 years. This is our 11th year now.
Oh, congratulations. How's business?
Oh, great. Hey, it's interesting about that. You know that the golf industry has very hard times the past few years.
Absolutely. Among other industries, but yeah.
Among other industries, but the golf industry is a very hard-hit industry for the past couple of years. Our sales doubled last year.
Wow.
And we're on track this year to double what we did last year.
Congratulations.
Now, bear in mind, we don't have a multi-million-dollar advertising budget. We certainly do not pay any player to play our clubs or endorse our clubs. That's another topic, but we don't do that. We rely on word of mouth. And what we will see, we'll ship a set of clubs out to Collierville, Tennessee, for instance. Within 4 months, we'll have 100 orders from Collierville, Tennessee. So it's strictly a word-of-mouth type of thing. And that's how our business has grown.
Well, that's really phenomenal. I commend you and congratulate you on that. How did you get to this? I mean, what were you doing that you determined, you know what, they're just not doing it right, I've got a better idea?
Well, what I was doing was playing bad golf. I'm just like anybody else. Things make sense or they don't make sense. And I've played golf for years. I've been a professional club builder for many, many years. And the whole time I was building clubs professionally, just like any professional club builder, I was striving to come up with something that actually improved a person's performance, make golf a little more enjoyable. I started experimenting. And, of course, I was experimenting on myself and so on and so forth. I came up with the idea just because it always made sense to me. I said, well, the club should be the same length. That just absolutely makes sense. I also knew that my favorite club in my bag was my 9-iron. I knew that. It was the club I had 100% confidence in, nailed it every time. So I said, you know what, let me build a set of clubs to the same specs as my 9-iron, but the only difference being the loft angle. And I did that, of course. You're adding weight and you're doing this, in order to make a conventional set of clubs work like that. What I found was the performance was unbelievable. Here's the difference. A lot of people will say, no, wait a second. If I get a set of irons from you and they're all the length of my 9-iron, I said, well, when I pull out the 3-iron and hit it, I've got to lose distance because that club's going to be a couple inches shorter than the 3-iron I've got right now. And they'll say this over and over. I say, well, laws of physics apply. And, of course, my answer to that is, well, laws of physics don't apply when you add the human element. What happens is, when you have a favorite club and your confidence level is through the roof, you don't worry about your swing, you don't worry about anything. You're looking at a pin. Your swing is automatic with that club. Now, say, for instance, you move one club up from that. Say it's your 9-iron's your favorite club, then you go to your 8-iron. Well, your confidence level goes down just a little bit. Your power will reduce a little bit. Everything will reduce a little bit. Go to your 7-iron. God news, your power will go down a little bit more because now you're just trying to make contact. By the time you get up to your 3-iron, you're so tentative on your swing, you're just trying to make some kind of contact. So your swing speed is actually lower with your 3-iron than it is with your 9-iron, which is your favorite club. Your confidence level is 0 with your 3-iron. If you do make contact, a good golfer will only hit the ball well half the time with his 3-iron. So in essence, when you go to a single-length set of clubs, and say they are all the length of your 9-iron, which is your favorite club, I've got news. You'll pick up distance with every club in the bag, just because every time you pull an iron out, whether it be a pitching wedge or a 3-iron, you're using the same swing, the same ball position, the same swing plane, the same stand. Everything's identical. You're only having to master one swing, as opposed to like 12 different swings with 12 different ball positions. Your confidence level goes through the roof.
Sure, I would think so.
And like I say, with your 3-iron, you'll actually hit it farther than you would hit an old 3-iron. And certainly, there again, you'll nail it 9 out of 10 times. So at the end of the day, everything's automatic. You just enjoy the game more.
Yeah.
You don't miss-hit. I mean, miss-hits become a thing of the past. It's a kind of a stunning thing to actually go out and play a set of these.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot of value to what you're saying, a lot of validity. I'm curious, you said that you haven't made any design changes over the last decade on these, but over the last decade there's been a lot of talk in club manufacturing about MOI, about COG. Yep. And I'm curious how that's impacted you. And also, are your irons, are they cavity back clubs? Are they blades? Do you have both? Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, we have one line of irons. And there again, it's the same thing. We will never have 2 or 3 lines of irons because what are you saying at that point in time? Well, this one's better than this one, or this one's better than this one. And our desire is just produce the best golf club we can produce. And that means one line of golf clubs. That's the best. If we came up with other ones, it would just be a marketing thing. We don't play that game. So that's number one. Our irons are they're cast from the highest grade 17-4 stainless steel in the golf industry. The specifications are as tight as any of the major brands within the golf industry. They have a deep undercut rear cavity. They have all the playability features you could ever design into a golf club. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're familiar, Ralph Maltby used to be with GolfWorks.
Sure.
He had set up what was the name of the program, where they tested the iron playability. And they had tested literally every iron that was ever made. And they rate it as far as playability, which takes into consideration, the low center of gravity, the moment of inertia, so on and so on and so forth. But they tested all these, and they have a ranking. If you go to the GolfWorks website, they have a ranking of, all the ones they've tested throughout the years. They categorize them into, I believe it's 6 categories. The highest being, ultra game improvement, and the lowest category being, player specials or something. Those old blades that nobody in the world could hit. We had sent ours in for testing. You don't pay for this, and it's completely independent. We had sent ours in back in 2005, and of course they ended up in the ultra playability category. The highest category for playability. And there again, it was just the design. When I designed them to be the most playable, the most forgiving, A lot of pros are actually playing. You know, people get the impression the pros play all these blades. It's not true. The pros need the forgiveness too. They need the playability features too. And most of the pros these days are playing these ultra, game improvement type of irons. So that's where ours, falls into that category. When you're talking about MOI, the moment of inertia, there's two different categories there. There's a moment of inertia of a club head itself. And that, the moment of inertia there, the MOI there, talks about the ability of the club head itself to resist twisting, if you hit it off center of gravity, off the sweet spot. There's also a moment of inertia, when you start the club down, the feel of a club. And then Tom Wishon from Wishon Golf is a big proponent of that, done a lot of work in that area.
And Tom is a regular. He's been on this program numerous times and is phenomenally intelligent and outspoken on club design. He's an old friend of GolfSmarter.
I mean, the guy's at the top of his game. There's no question about it. And his work in research in the moment of inertia of a golf club, well, let's put it this way. The parameters before was all based on swing weight. Swing weight was I always thought was a joke. As a matter of fact, I used my swing weight scale as a drag anchor on my boat. It's a worthless measurement. The idea being, well, each golf club will feel the same when you hit it, and so on and so forth. Well, they don't. If you're playing a pitching wedge, a conventional pitching wedge, and you pick up a conventional 3-iron, there's no way to disguise the fact that you've got two completely different clubs in your hand. The swing weight might be the same. There's no way to disguise that. The moment of inertia testing, however, is based on the feel of the club head when you swing. And it's much, much more precise. If you can MOI match all your clubs, that's a great thing. Here's the interesting point. You can MOI match a set of golf clubs, so they all feel the same at the beginning of your swing, okay? Or you can swing weight all your golf clubs, so they all basically have the same swing weight. In a conventional set of clubs, you can't do both. I mean, they're mutually exclusive. You can MOI match them, or you can swing weight match them. You can't do both. Here's the interesting thing. In a single-length set of irons like ours, swing weight is automatically matched. And the moment of inertia is automatically matched. They're the only clubs made that are both swing weight and MOI matched. This is very interesting because the fact that our iron's a single-length set, it's the same shafting, the same shaft, the same. These are identical clubs. If you're swinging our 3-iron, you're swinging our lob wedge, you'd never notice the difference. These clubs are identical, so they can be both MOI and swing weight matched at the same time.
I've also noticed on your website that you don't just do irons.
No, we do fairway woods, and of course we have a driver too. Now, a driver isn't specific to a single-length fairy, but we had so many requests for a driver that I spent a few years designing our driver, which is 2 to 3 inches shorter, than a standard driver that you go out and buy. Well,
Tom Wishon has always said that the driver lengths are too long.
Oh, absolutely. He's right on the nose. There's no question. It gets back to that thing. People say, well, gee, the longer the club, the farther you're going to hit the ball. That's only if you can hit the ball. It's just that simple. And to be honest with you, these guys will go out and pay $500 or $600 for a 45, 46-inch long driver. It looks like a Labor Light sword with this fine, beautiful graphite shaft and so on and so forth. And they'll come out of their shoes when they're up around the tee. And the thing is, they might hit it 10 yards farther, but it's 10 yards farther into the woods. It's ridiculous. You have no control by this. So when I designed this driver, I designed it to be a much shorter club length, which gives you that extra degree of control, plus it's steel shaft.
Yeah.
So you get a lot more consistency. You're in the fairway a much, much higher percentage of the time. And as far as distance, I'll guarantee I can hit this as far as I've ever hit any driver in my life. It's built with a more upright lie angle, too. 90% of golfers have the tendency to push the ball to the right or slice it. This club head design eliminates quite a bit of that. But we have the driver, and then we have the fairway woods. Now, as I said, the driver isn't specific, to single-length play. However, our fairway woods, all of our fairway woods, there again, are built to the same club. There again, these are identical clubs. We carry a 3, 5, and a 7 wood. If you get all the woods, they're identical. The only difference being the loft angle on that club face. And there again, our fairway woods are much shorter than you could probably equate them to conventional 7-iron or 7-wood club length.
David, it's really I tried to discredit you.
Come on now.
No, I mean, I've tried to figure out how come no one else is doing this, but you had the right answer for every question. I appreciate your time very much. We appreciate your generosity, and wish you the best of luck. Thanks so much. It's oneirongolf.com and the president of the company, David Lake. David, thanks so much for coming on to Golf Smarter.
Well, Fred, thank you very much for having me.